Hey, Jensen.
Hi, Andre. How are you?
Good. Am I really the first one?
You are. You're nice and on time.
Thanks. I bet you've been here for a long time already, though. Right?
Uh, I just got on. We just got out of the cow at like 6:20, and then I had to run downstairs, grab some dinner, call my dad. So many things. Like, gotta
Oh
go.
my gosh, no. Hopefully your dad is okay, COVID free.
He's good. He retired from the fire department today. So
Wow,
yeah,
that's
so
amazing.
it was a great day. So it was a nice text that I got earlier. I'm like, well, I'll have to call you before the night's over.
Oh,
So
that's so special. Wow, how many
yeah,
years was he serving?
34 years and 7 months.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
That's a
So
hard job.
it's
Wow,
like
for 30 years.
it's crazy. And so we grew up in Everett, and he was a firefighter in Everett. And it's just like,
Wow.
all of our memories when we were younger were like at the firehouse, and like
Oh,
his best friend was on his group for a long time, and he married Rob and I. Like we have a really close relationship with some of his like firefighter brothers that are like kind of like uncles to us. So it's really
oh.
special. So yeah,
Yeah, that's super special. Wow.
yeah.
That's amazing.
So
He must have amazing stories too, because that's a super hard job.
oh my gosh,
Um,
the stories are
yeah.
just crazy. I mean, he's delivered a baby, he's,
My God.
saved kids, there's so many different things, but it's just, he has a
Oh,
lot to be proud of. So it was a
wow.
good
Yeah.
phone
Yeah,
call.
they're heroes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, they're definitely heroes, that's for sure.
they
Yeah.
surely are, especially
Mm.
my dad.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Does it look like we have a big group watching the school committee tonight? I guess I don't know. Can you tell how many people watch?
Yeah, you can too. If you look down at participants, you can see who's a panelist and who's attending.
Oh, can they listen to us talk now, or
They can.
is
Yep.
this
So we're live as soon as it goes. So
okay? Wonderful.
so now
Good.
everybody knows that my dad retired today.
No, yeah, firefighter. Yeah.
Oh,
Wonderful.
it's funny. But it looks like we have a big meeting tonight. So lots of stuff.
Yeah. Yep. This is a big one.
I know I have to get I'm advancing slides for Kate tonight, so I got to get that up.
Yeah, for sure. Go for it.
Did all that registration stuff make sense to you?
For what? For
Um,
tonight's campaign?
no, for the course.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
definitely. And Martha sounds like she was able to sign up just fine.
great.
So yeah, I'll be processing all the rest of the stuff like early tomorrow, and it should be good to go.
Yeah, and I mean, if you email it all to Monica, that should be fine as well. I assume it's coming out of your Title 3. Would it be coming out of your Title
Uh,
3 grant?
no, I'll probably take it right out of our budget for contracted services, professional development.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that can just, I think that's Kelly then. Um,
yeah,
and she'll take care of all of that. But I just let them know that Martha's all set with registering, because sometimes when you submit it, they have to also register the employee, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So
yeah, definitely.
should be
Yeah,
fine.
it's really sure. Yeah, she sent me an email saying she was able to register, which is good news.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great when the companies do that, and they should do it more often, knowing that a lot of schools use purchase orders. So it's so much
yeah,
better when they accept those. But if they don't, we kind of get stuck where that reimbursement piece comes in. But
definitely.
good to know
Yeah.
that she's all set.
Yeah, the PD vendors were super nice, and they told us, like they'll figure it all out with the purchase order. So
Good.
yeah.
Hi, Andre.
How are you, Saya?
I'm good, good. Already on.
Good evening, everyone. I just received a message from the mayor that she's running about 5 to 10 minutes late. She's asked me to get the meeting started. So at this time, I'm going to call the meeting to order at approximately 7:04 p.m. And at this time, I would like to entertain a motion to accept the agenda. I see Mr. Fleming.
Yes, I think we should start with attendance first, and then I'll move to accept the agenda.
My apologies, Mr. Fleming. Great catch there. Miss
Manny, I
Yes.
think it's attendance and then the explanation about the translation.
Open meeting law and the translation. Yep.
Yeah.
So at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Frost, after I've called the meeting to order at 7:04, to just call the roll with respect to attendance.
Sure. Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Here.
Mr. Cruz,
Present.
Mr. Fleming,
Yeah,
Ms. Manning,
Yep.
Dr. Pingalo,
Present.
and Mayor Driscoll, not present, 6 present currently.
And thank you, Ms. Manning, for just flagging that particular piece. Did want to note, per the open meeting law exemption that was created under the emergency orders, that we are still meeting at our regularly scheduled meeting remotely. And additionally, we are having live Spanish interpretation per our policy. And at this time, now I'm going to ask for that motion with respect to accepting today's agenda. Mr. Fleming,
who's accepted the agenda?
do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Manning, I'm going to call the roll. Mr. Fleming,
Yes,
Ms. Manning,
Yep.
Dr. Hangalo,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz, yes. 6 in the affirmative. The motion carries. At this time, I'm going to entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
move approval.
Motion made by Mr. Fleming. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Manning. This time, I'm going to call the roll. Mr. Fleming,
Yes,
Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz? Yes, 6 in the affirmative, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda, we have public comment. And the instructions are laid out forth in the agenda. And at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Frost if she can share if we have any public comment.
We have one public comment to be read that is submitted by Paul Giglio and Jean Britsky of 54 Lawrence Street. It reads, Mr. Commissioner, who had no problem smiling cheek to cheek, hunting down tests for SOS teachers and staff by Monday morning, which don't and didn't even require to even show positive or a negative test. I'm seeing posts on different social media platforms about teachers and nurses, teachers, paraprofessionals, staff don't put on yellow scrubs, hats, N95 masks or face shields, as do doctors and nurses. Some of these hospitals in Massachusetts are equipped. Our teachers don't get the pay rate of Tom Brady. Most and almost all come out of their own pockets, who also have families and children they need to feed and keep a roof over their head. So while the Commissioner Desi was so quick to find those rapid tests for teachers to return to work to get in those 180 days that could have been made up during April vacation, we don't live in the 1960s anymore. Have him get these teachers and staff the safety PPE instead of waiting 3 weeks. Dr. Stevens Reich, let's get the squeaky wheel turning. I have a lot of faith in you. End comment.
Thank you, Ms. Frost, for reading that comment into the record, and certainly just want to recognize there are some challenges associated with this pandemic and the testing and access to PPE still, and certainly appreciate the advocacy there. So at this time, I understand that the next item on the agenda is a student showcase, so I would love to pass the floor over to Dr. Reich to kick us off.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cruz, in your new capacity as vice chair. I do want to take also a moment to welcome Miss Beth Ann Cornell to the school committee, somewhere on my screen. And I'm really pleased to be able to introduce New Liberty School, New Liberty Innovation School, which is presenting tonight as part of the showcase. Before I pass it along to Principal Windsor, their graduation they have a mid-year graduation scheduled for this Wednesday that I want to make sure people are aware of. We have 4 graduates, I believe, and school committee members have been invited to attend. There's also a Zoom link, but we're very excited to recognize some of our scholars who are going to be crossing the finish line, which is a day of certainly a noteworthy event for them and their families. So with that, I'll pass it over to Principal Windsor to introduce her team and some students that I think are here with her.
Yeah, thank you. So unfortunately, one of my staff members is having a very hard time getting on to the Zoom, which is my school adjustment counselor, Jen.
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. She just got on just in the nick of time. Okay, so yeah. So Jen and Terrell Green no longer works at our school, but still helps us in this capacity. He works for the district, have taken the lead on Race Matters conversations, which some of you know about, but many of you don't. And really, we're going to hear from the students. They've created a short presentation to go over. So unless Jen and Terrell want to say anything, I'll just introduce the students. Okay, so we have Jade Mashad and Kiana Womack. They are both seniors, not graduating tomorrow, graduating in June. And they've been super active in Race Matters at our school for the last few years now. So take it away. You guys can share your screen.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Jade.
And I'm Kiana.
Okay, so I have a slideshow presentation. I just have to share my screen. Okay, desktop 1.
And while you pull that up, I just wanted to note for the record that Mayor Driscoll has joined the meeting at 7:10.
Thank you all. Thanks, Manny.
My pleasure.
All right. Okay. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so Race Matters. Who are we? So for the past 2 years, we participated in a class at our school called Race Matters. This short little presentation will give you a brief introduction of who we are and what we do. So, okay. What is Race Matters? So we started Race Matters in the summer of 2020 after we had a lot of change in our society, our culture, our belief systems, everything. There was a lot of change during the lockdown, you know, with the pandemic, and then a lot of other following events. So the summer of 2020, we thought that it would be the perfect time to gather small groups of students, and we began outside at the Salem Commons, and we just sat in a group and we all talked. It was student led pretty much, and we just expressed a lot of our feelings and how we felt about different things that were going on, opinionated, not opinionated, just everything like that. So it's a very informal discussion, but we do talk about pretty deep and heavy things. So we provide firsthand experiences, opinions. We have learned to agree and disagree respectfully. Some debates here and there, but of course those debates are staff-led. You know, we have a lot of help how to learn how to have a debate and conversations like that can be very difficult to have. We started this because social developments have had a vast impact on our generation, and we are now being influenced by continuous change within our society. We saw a problem with the lack of cultural competence and diversity training in schools, and we developed a program to counteract this.
Why do we have Race Matters? We have Race Matters to educate the people within our community and to create a district-wide change amongst all of us. And we have Race Matters to create a space that influences and educates about becoming like active in social and environmental change and reparation. We also have Race Matters to just create change all around us and to just educate. And back to just what Jade said, like the impacts it has on us and like what can we do about what's going on in the world and like, you know, things of what to avoid and like, you know, how to make something better. Like even if it's something small, it's still big at the end of the day, you know what I mean? Like any change is still change, and that's what we're looking for. And I think that's where we're heading.
Yeah, so we developed the idea that knowledge is power, and power is wealth, you know, and wealth is everything in our society. So turning our education and our educational experience into something that is going to further us as human beings, our morally and everything like that, we just saw a real need for this.
Do you want to
So,
go back and forth on this question?
Sure.
Try.
Yeah.
And the last question is, how are we making change? And do you want to say something first, and I'll kind of bounce off you?
Sure. So we have partnered with the Equity Imperative team from Chicago, as well as, I believe, I forget who else from the Salem. Jen.
Keep going, keep going.
You guys are doing great. You guys are doing great.
Okay.
Well, we
partnered with the Equity Imperative over Zoom meetings and then an in-person discussion we were so lucky to have.
Chicago.
Yeah, all the way from Chicago. But they developed, and we are also in the process of developing a student voice project.
And like what gets in the way of all the student groups like succeeding in Salem public schools, and like how we can go about that.
Yeah, so that's our main question, and we are going to begin a research project, and we have bounced back and forth between what is the question going to be, how do we include everything that we cover in this class, because we go from point A to point B so quickly, and it always circles back. And that's the great part about having informal discussions with youth, because we have a lot to say and everyone's so opinionated and we all want to like hype each other up, but then also argue because we have different opinions, and we've learned how to structure that so that we can all learn from one another
and hear one another out.
Right. And the firsthand experiences in a diverse setting, it's crazy how much you hear from so many different demographics, right?
Yeah.
So basically the overarching idea of what we're probably going to do research on is the teacher impact on students and discipline disparities between different groups of students, and how what gets in the way of how they're succeeding, basically.
How they're learning, like what they're doing during class, like, you know, how much engagement is going on and stuff like that.
Engagement for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically just the main ideas of everything.
Just like the major points you should know about the class as like a whole, kind
Yeah.
of what we do.
So Jade and Kiana, thank you so much for coming on this evening to kind of share with school committee members and give us some insights about this work that you're undertaking, and just kudos, because this is the work. This is really important, not just in your school, but across our district and frankly across our country. So really grateful that you were able to share with us some of the why, some of the what, and definitely want to keep those conversations going, those actions going. And we're still really trying to find ways to make sure we're being more thoughtful around student voice. And this evening and hearing from you, certainly, for us is really important. And we're grateful for you carving out time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. We appreciate it.
So I know there are other school committee members. So maybe if you're done, I don't want to take down the presentation, but if you are done, we can go back to our regular screen. And I know there may be some other folks who want to offer questions or comments, if that's okay with you guys.
Okay.
Great. Is there something, Kiana or Jade, that you wanted to offer? I didn't mean to cut you off either.
Oh, no, you
totally.
didn't. Thank you
Okay.
so much for the time.
Thank you.
Well, stick around, because I think there are other school committee members who want to offer some comments and hear a little bit more from you, okay? So I saw Dr. Pangalo's hand, so I'll start with her.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. It's really great to see what you've been working on, and I'm really excited about it. And my question is actually, I would love to have you come back and present the results once you have them. Would that be something you'd be interested in doing?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I think that we were just previously discussing it, but we have every age group that is in our school in our class. So next time, I think it would be awesome if we had a younger student on here as well with us, because then it can just go to show that everybody is learning this. We are all learning everything that we are doing. It's real world, real life stuff. So yeah, I'm totally interested in that.
I think that's a great idea, and I think that the results of this could be extremely important in guiding some of our work on the equity imperative and some of the work around equity. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think I saw Miss Manning's hand next, and then I'm sorry, Mr. Cruz after that, okay?
Hi, yeah, I wanted to thank both of the students for the presentation, and I was going to ask the question that Dr. Pangalo asked. My first question was going to be, would you come back and present your work as you're going along through the rest of the year? Because I really have to say that I've seen a lot of presentations at school committee, both sitting in the audience and sitting up here as a member. And I have to say that these two young women have presented probably the most real presentation that I've seen. The authenticity in what they're doing and what they're building and why they're doing it. And just the reality of the presentation, I think is absolutely superb. I'm so glad that they were here to do this, and that they're explaining what they're doing to us, and certainly look forward to seeing them back at least one more time, and maybe if we can fit it in a couple of more times before the end of the year. But great work, what you're doing and how you're presenting it.
Thank
you so much.
You're welcome.
I saw Mr. Cruz, but Ms. Thomas, did you want to weigh in before we took Mr. Cruz's question?
Well, just that thank you very much, Ms. Mayor. I just wanted to also say that there's going to be times with through the cycle of for us to invite stakeholders to come to us too. So we'll definitely reach out and invite school committee members and the superintendent and anyone else who wants to come along to hear us as we progress, but we're also always happy to come back. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Mr. Cruz.
And I also wanted to thank Jade and Kiana for coming today and for presenting. This is incredible, and certainly want to give another shout out to my colleague Amanda Campbell for making that connection with the equity imperative. We did steal those folks over from Lynn, and Steve did swoop in pretty quickly. So this work is incredible, and I think that one thing that I want to make sure we make the connection to is that we have a student representative and a student advisory council that's doing some work around the exact issues that you raised around disparities on student discipline. And they're actually looking for ways to build stronger connections with the other two high schools in the district, so the Salem Prep and the New Liberty Innovation School. So I think that it would be fantastic as one of those stakeholder groups if you all had a chance to have the Student Advisory Council, or at least the student representative, come to you all to learn about your research, but then what are the opportunities for you all to collaborate on some of the campaigns that they want to plan around the exact issues that you've raised. So I think it would be excellent to make that introduction, and I'll could be today because she's catching up on homework, but I'll be sure to pass along her contact information to Ms. Windsor.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Cruz. Other comments or questions from committee members? Ms. Cornell.
That was really great. That's really cool work that you're doing, and it's really hard work. And you're older students, so and you even said they can be really complicated conversations. But I'm wondering, in your opinion, if you think that there's a way to kind of modify conversations like this for younger kids, like middle school kids, or if it's too hard.
I don't know. I feel like it depends on the maturity, because even at my school, like I go to a high school and you still come across some kids that just might not have the understanding level that you might need
but
to
I
have
think
met.
Not to disagree with you publicly. However,
Okay.
no, this is something everyone needs to learn. Every age group needs to learn. Everywhere. Okay,
but it's the engagement, because the maturity, I feel like, is involved with the engagement.
If I have learned anything being a student at New Liberty, it is that it is possible for educators to cater to who they are teaching to. Point 100%. Blank, period. So that being said, every age group, it is going to be a different system put in place in order for them to develop these skills and learn what we are learning right now. But it needs to be slowly implemented into one day they can have this conversation. Being from Marblehead, it's very secluded, non-diverse, So me going to New Liberty, I was learning a lot of new things for a lot of new cultures and diversities and everything going there. So this definitely helped me with that. And even if the maturity is different, change the education.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd also like you two to go down to Collins and just do all this for my daughter. She's in 6th grade. You two specifically, you can go in and help out.
Yeah.
I think that this is our way of saying we're really impressed with your efforts, the authenticity of it, and peer-to-peer learning is so important. Your ability to convey your thoughts on these topics that can be weighty and can find people in different, just the two of you sitting here might have differences of opinion, right? But oftentimes we've lost the opportunity to engage when we have differences of opinion. And you've clearly shown that, hey, how do we break down these barriers and make it possible? So great work. Terrell, I think I saw your hand. I'm sorry, Mr. Cruz, did we not get to you yet? I apologize.
No, I was just going to flag that I saw Mr. Green's hand up.
All right. Hey, Terrell, just wanted to recognize if you had a comment or a question.
Yeah, I just to Ms. Cornell, I hope I'm saying your name right. I just wanted to put it out there too that we have been in talks on and off too with about taking this group and seeing if we could work with younger children too, like at SALTs and different schools that are around us. So these are ideas that have been played with in the development of this group. So stay tuned. There could be a possibility where something like that will be happening.
And sorry to jump in, the Student Voice Project has a group from the Collins too. So there is an opportunity there already too, so they're trying to basically use our model a little bit to germinate all the other things that are going on in the schools too. Not that we figured it out or anything, but we just started earlier, right? So we're kind of like early adopters before the equity imperative came in. We were already having these conversations. So we're kind of just a little bit ahead where other people are at.
Can I just add,
please, Kate?
So the equity imperative is doing the Youth Voice Project not only with all 3 high schools, so Salem Prep, Salem High School, and then both the middle schools. So there's a group. at Saltonstall and at the Collins, and we've recruited teacher mentors in each of the schools to be working with those students. So those 5 groups are up and running. So at some point we could do a showcase of all the findings of the research projects that they are working on.
Perfect. I mean, I just want to commend the district for really leaning in this effort, and really grateful for the level of commitment that we've seen from staff, from students. And I think it speaks to why we think this is so important as a school community. But it does take tending to, right? And this is the work. So if there's no other comments, I'll move us along on our agenda, but I just want to make sure if anybody else has anything else they'd like to weigh in on, that we give them a chance to. Okay, we'll keep it moving. So Jade, Kiana, thanks so much for being here. Ms. Thomas, Ms. Windsor, appreciate the showcase today for New Liberty. And I think you've inspired us this evening to continue on in this work, and much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to move us along to our superintendent's report and turn it over to Dr. Reich.
Yeah, I mean, we should just close the meeting right now. I mean, that was, I mean, I was going to ask them, but I didn't want to prolong their time. But these are the kinds of students we want to recruit to become our future teachers as well. You know, I'm very impressed. So thank you, Miss Principal Windsor. I see you're still on the Zoom. So thank you for the work you've done with them. But they're obviously very strong leaders and the kind of people, and to Ms. Cornell's point, I'd love to have them work more directly with some of our young people. So our younger students. So just a couple of things on less interesting topics. I was going to share a little bit about, I'm going to give a little COVID update. We have some information about the expo, now we call it the Early Childhood Expo, because we have pre-kindergarten. Deputy Superintendent Carboni is going to talk about that. And then I'm going to just share a little bit about our enrollment targets for the upcoming school year. I did just want to start by saying just a word of gratitude to all our staff, but in particular our nurses over the last few weeks. I don't even, words do not do justice to what our nurses have, been through, and the support that they're giving everyone in our community, not just the students and families, but their colleagues and staff members with the surge we've had, and they've been working on overdrive. I know that the nurse here at Collins has been here later than me on multiple, nights, working around the clock. On weekends, and we're just really grateful we do have a special team of nurses here in Salem. I've been very impressed, I had a chance to get their feedback on some of our guidance, and to their credit, they're professional through and through. So I just want to say that to start, not to underplay the efforts of everybody else, but clearly the last couple of weeks have just shown us how invaluable our nursing team is, led by Dr. Mosky Weber. So with that, we want to get into the exciting topic of COVID, and I did want to pass it over to Chelsea Banks, who will give you sort of the most up-to-date snapshot on where we are as a district, and take any questions that you might have. So Chelsea, I'll turn it over to you so you can share your screen.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. So here we are in January of 2022, and I think this is not quite where anybody anticipated we might be, but we have some updates. And with our updates, it's also in a rapidly changing landscape. Part of what we've been managing over the past few weeks is the change that came down from the CDC through the state to us, and an announcement this morning from the state. So this does not reflect any of today's changes that might be coming up soon, but rather what we've put in place at the start of the calendar year. So to start, in recognition of what we were seeing in schools and how to best manage this work, we do continue to work in partnership with our public health advisors, as Dr. Reich said, with our nurses, and updated our response for the surge. So over the winter holidays, the CDC did change the isolation period to 5 days for those who have tested positive for COVID. We followed strong existing data and evolving data to add test to return, requiring a negative rapid test to test out of isolation if you are returning before day 10. So after day 10, the existing or the guidance that we have been operating on since COVID came about and impacted us is after day 10, you can just return. But if you're trying to return before day 10, between day 6 and day 10, you do need that rapid test to be negative to return. And we continue to maximize the use of the DESI testing program. We're doing about 2,500 tests per week. Right now, we're up to 71% of our students who have consent to participate, and many of our staff are participating as well. And then we are complementing that with the iHealth distribution we've worked with in partnership with the city, which is the at-home tests that help us run the test to return program, because that is an additional layer that Salem has put into place that was not part of the DESI testing program. As a quick example for some data, our schools are doing an amazing job. One of the heroic efforts that the nurses are putting in is keeping up with tracking all of these cases. So as of the weekend, at Collins Middle School, where Dr. Streich was saying, our nurses are doing an amazing job, as they are across the district. But we had, you'll see on the next slide, quite a few cases come in between the break and the last week. Of those, 39 students did successfully return to school prior to the full 10-day isolation. They had tested negative and gained in-person learning days that they would have previously missed by being out of school. We did have 10 students return who did test positive upon return. And so that morning, they come immediately to test and they go home and complete the full isolation. And then we did have 24 additional students who, depending on the timing, we did have 2 3-day weekends come in this pattern as well, but they just chose to complete the full 10-day isolation and did not need to test upon return. So it's an example of one of the pieces of changes that has come into place is this isolation period shortened as an option, and we have the test to return now in place. On the right, one of the pieces that we are evolving is keeping up with the notifications and contact tracing. So our focus continues to be to identify positive cases, ensure they are not in school. And we are shifting to this long-term management of the virus. We're also seeing an increase in symptoms in many of our cases. And so watching those cases as well with the symptoms. In this case, if there's a first or second case in a classroom, we are notifying the whole class with each case. But we are not doing that individual contact tracing. This is a lot of cases coming in from the community. And so we are identifying that case, we are making that case's home, and we are notifying the whole class of that case. If there are right now 3 or more cases in a classroom, we do then contact trace for the whole classroom. Anybody that is unvaccinated and does not participate in testing at the time that they are identified in that process do need to complete the quarantine. And this is because if there's these multiple cases in the classroom, we can't tell if that other student is positive or not. So if we're unable to test them and they are not yet vaccinated, they are completing that 5-day quarantine. Again, the 3-day weekends have helped in this. These have been relatively few missed days of school, which is very helpful, and a very small number of students do fall into that unvaccinated and no test consent. Those with consent get a rapid test right there, the negatives stay and enroll in test to stay. Those who are fully vaccinated or recently recovered from COVID are exempt and do not need to participate. If they are vaccinated and are consented to test, we do give them the rapid test just to make sure and check at that time. So those are shifts that have taken place. It is helping us to manage the numbers, and it's also helping to keep the focus on ensuring that students who are positive are going home and we are keeping our classrooms as safe as possible during this time. I'm going to go on to data onto the next slide, and we can take questions at the end if that's okay. So this slide is a little bit busy. It's a little hard to track the different pieces here, largely because the time periods that we're talking about are quite different. So the gray bar in the top is students and the bottom is staff cases. You'll notice the axes are pretty different on there, just to name that the bar sizes are not parallel. But the gray bar is the total number of cases we saw from the start of school to December 23rd, the last day of school for the first semester. The bright blue bar is the number of cases that were reported during the winter break. So from 12/24 to 1/2, inclusive of that, we did deploy tests to every staff and student that was in school on the Wednesday and Thursday before the holiday. And so those tests were able to be taken on the 2nd. So we did see a number of cases get reported on the 2nd. So that blue bar is per school for students and staff, positives that were reported between the 24th and the 2nd. You then see the green bar, which is actually just the short week from the 3rd to the 6th. So we report on Friday, so we close out the numbers on Thursday evening. So the green bar is from the 3rd to the 6th, and then the yellow bar is this past week from the 7th Friday to Thursday of this past week. So what you will see is those numbers, they are much higher than we had seen. We are in the surge. They are on par with what the state is seeing. But we are now seeing the daily case rate for the last week. It does feel we are optimistic and knocking on wood that we are starting to see the daily case rate come down, and that kind of that week of the 3rd to the 6th is where we peaked. But you will also see that we've been managing with many more staff members who have been in the situation of having COVID over the past few weeks, and making sure that we are able to safely staff our schools. This has been an all hands on deck moment in our schools as we go through this and hopefully are getting out on the other side. And finally, just looking
Chelsea,
forward.
can I
Yeah,
jump in there? I just want to call out that if you go back, with the number of staff that have been out, we've been messaging to families. It's not unusual that your child may have had a substitute in the middle school and at the elementary school level, and at the high school. We've been using, students have been coming to the cafeterias or to the auditorium for classes, which is not ideal. We just don't have the substitutes, and we've had just such large numbers of staff who are out in buildings. We do think we're on the other side of that, and we think it's improving, but it's something we've been battling all year. And you will see, obviously, the school committee members that later on in the agenda is a vote around the pay rate for substitutes. We're trying to do whatever we can to increase our pool to avoid, we'd prefer to have substitutes if we could, but that's been a challenge, obviously. And it's no secret that is something that all students have faced, is the fact that their teachers have been out and staff have been out throughout, especially through this surge.
And last, just looking forward, you can see our motto. We have 3 siblings at the Bentley School who all came to Salt and Stall on Saturday to get vaccinated. This is one of my favorite pictures from the fall. But looking forward, we are engaging our families. So Dr. Reich and Assad have been working with our amazing family engagement facilitators to reach out to families to support access to getting consent for testing and the vaccination clinics. So you will see the city has had many vaccination clinics over the last week, and this week we also have our first of the new year on Friday, and have another one coming up after that. We also have ongoing rapid test distribution. So we did that distribution over the winter break. It is Tuesday, so yesterday we did distribute over 150 tests at the high school. If you were symptomatic, if you are looking to participate in tests to return or home-based close contacts, you could come and pick up a test. We are also able to distribute those eye health tests in schools for the same reason. So we are able to use those to help complement and supplement our testing program in schools. We continue to look to increase vaccination rates. Again, this upcoming clinic this Friday from 12 to 6 at Collins, you can get child, adult, and booster vaccines. There are also multiple clinics in the city this week. The ability to schedule a clinic now in partnership with the North Shore Community Health Center. So if we receive for adult vaccines 12 and over, that they're able to actually come to any of the 3 high schools and the middle schools to deliver those vaccines, which is a new flexibility that we've been able to implement this calendar year. And we are working to establish expectations and a timeline for an employee vaccination requirement in line with the city. We do continue to reflect and learn. We continue the close partnership and update our guidance, which may be coming sooner than we had seen before we made this presentation. And because DESE released this updated guidance today. So stay tuned. It's always the fun time in this world of this roller coaster of COVID. That is our update for January for right now.
Yeah, one thing, Mayor, you're going to see in the news tonight that there's a new testing program that the state released today. Chelsea just mentioned it. Before we start commenting on it, we need to better understand it. It is about eliminating test to stay and utilizing rapids, sending rapids home with students and staff. But we need to better understand what that means for us. There's webinars scheduled for tomorrow, and then we'll report back as to what our plan is. We are eligible to participate because we are a district that has been pool testing since the start of the school year. well, really since last school year. And so we are eligible. If you're not participating in pool testing, weekly testing, then you would not be eligible. So we have the option of participating. But because parents have been through a lot of changes and guidance over the last 2 weeks, I promise you we'll need a few more days before we switch it up on folks yet again. But we're just trying to keep up with, the guidance. I promise you we'll make a thoughtful decision based on what we learn and what we think is in the best interest of our students. We do continue to consult with our health and safety advisors. Dr. Pangalo is our resident expert, but we've also connected with Dr. Campbell, who's our physician, Dr. Lucas, who was part of our Facebook Live a few weeks ago. And the Board of Health has also weighed in. So all of those folks need to guide us before we make any drastic changes to our protocols. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Zreik, and certainly want to offer any questions or comments from school committee members and really commend you and Chelsea, Charlene, the entire team, the school nurses, unsung heroines primarily throughout this entire pandemic. And certainly as we come back to school, just the onslaught with the Omicron virus, I think really tipped the scales in terms of how much work is on their plate. Really grateful. There are plenty of school districts that are not doing pool testing. They're not undertaking the level of care and work that we are, because it is a tremendous amount of work that existing staff are taking on. And even as we've tried to supplement, it can sometimes be easier not to know, but we know it's not safer. And I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we're doing everything we can to create an in-person learning environment that is safe for staff, students, and families, and that people recognize that we're going to go those extra efforts. We have been since the beginning of this pandemic. Today, the community in our city gave out 1,400 rapid tests. You gave out almost 200 on Sunday. Like, we are really trying to position ourselves to identify anyone who does come down with COVID, so that we can do our best to isolate and not continue the spread from happening. I think the other key factor that you mentioned is just the vaccinations. We're still certainly in need of additional students and staff, or students and families, I should say, to really consider vaccinations. We know that's really going to be key in keeping schools in person, and most importantly, from preventing people from getting so sick that they end up hospitalized. Our Northeast region is just, over the top overwhelmed with people in the hospital. We stand out from all the other regions in Massachusetts, and there are very few beds available. And the level of care that we're able to give when things are so tightly wound at our hospitals is really something that we're very concerned about, whether you're there for COVID or, God forbid, some other tragedy that brings you into the hospital. And these are all key. Like, all of these levers are key to keeping schools open, to keeping our community safe, getting tested, getting vaccinated. Our vaccine requirement started citywide this weekend. And we know that our staff requirements are going to kick in, towards the end of the month. And these are things that are not designed to be punitive, but really designed for our collective safety, and anything we can do to try and help spread the word from peers, students, committee members, as to why this work is necessary, and really to thank the outstanding staff. We have been leaders as a school district, and I think, frankly, as a community, in trying to provide safe settings for our residents, and that's going to continue throughout this pandemic. So questions or concerns or comments for Dr. Zreik or Chelsea as we talk about COVID and the latest updates? Dr. Pangalo, I don't want to leave you out of the thanks and appreciation. This is the time to have, a scientist on your school committee. So we are grateful. Mr. Cruz, did I see your hand raised?
You did. Thank you, Mayor. And well said. You hit a number of great points there, and on was the vaccination rates and where we're at. And Chelsea, I know in previous presentations we've received information about particular demographics within the city, and I think it would be great. I know this isn't going to be the last COVID update we're going to get, but to continue to just share out at the school committee level where we stand with respect to vaccination rates against demographics, just so that we can have the full picture of perhaps how things progress with some of the interventions that are on the way with respect to the vaccination requirement and passport kind of being implemented, and then some of the other pieces. So I do think that would be helpful to kind of look at it as like the the goalpost and where we're at, and I think continue to put a little bit of pressure on folks in the public to take a look at this data, how it relates to the schools, and the number of times we're going to end up having this conversation until we reach those folks that have either residency, the information hasn't reached them. And so those are just the things that I think about, the subsequent update. It would be great to get a better sense of where we're at with the demographics.
We'd be happy to do that. Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Yeah, especially would love to see the before and after on that, just to piggyback where we're at before we started making calls. I think we had something like 1,900 students that weren't vaccinated that we're really going to try and target for information and to try and better understand if there's something we can do to address their concerns. So thank you for that. Dr. Payne.
Yeah, I want to extend my gratitude and thanks to the team of the district for all their work on the COVID response. The nurses are just unbelievably kind and caring and effective and just so hardworking. So is our team devoted to implementing vaccine clinics and testing and all of that. And I think it's really important to note that the clinics that the district has been running is responsible for, I think, at least half of the vaccines for our younger students, our 5 to 11, something like about half. I'm sure Chelsea has the exact numbers, but it's really what has allowed us to keep pace with the state averages there. And I think that that they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I also wanted to speak to anybody who's watching who may still have concerns about vaccinating your own kids. It's something I know people were really nervous about because they didn't feel there was enough information and enough data. And at this point, we've had vaccinations for kids for a few months now. There are close to 9 million doses that have already been administered, and they are proving to be some of the safest vaccines that we've seen. It's really absolutely astonishing. So if you're still concerned, I would definitely start looking at the information again, because there's a lot more data now, and they're incredibly safe and incredibly effective. So remember, these vaccines, they can not only help prevent you from getting infected, but if you do get infected, which can happen, it is going around. My younger daughter, Lucy, is test positive over the weekend, but she was vaccinated. So she had like a stuffy nose and a sore throat for a day, and that's been it. So it can really be an incredibly effective tool to help prevent not only getting infected, but also to prevent illness, because no one really wants to be sick. So use the vaccines, take advantage of them. They're an incredibly safe and effective tool.
Thank you, Dr. Pangalo. Any other questions or comments for either Drs. Reich or Chelsea Banks on this program? Okay, Dr. Reich, I'll turn it back over to you for your additional superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I do want to thank the city also for helping us acquire more of the iHealth kits that has allowed us to also do our own distribution and have more access into the school. So we appreciate that. We're going to shift over to our Early Childhood Expo and our enrollment registration update. And I'm not sure how many of you saw the article in the Boston Globe about pre-K that appeared, I believe, yesterday about the disparities or the differences between Alabama and not a state you think of when you think of education quality, but the disparity in what they offer relative to Massachusetts in terms of pre-K options for families. And I do think it's for me, it reinforced that the decision that we've made to invest in our early childhood programming was a good one, using some of our ESSER funds, our COVID relief dollars to invest in something that's so critical to our families and the workforce. Just, I think, underscores, the importance of continuing to have these programs. And thankfully now we have a little more time to prepare for enrollment. Last year was, I think Kate was and Emily Ullman were racing to open classes in late in the spring and the summer when we knew we had the funding to do it. So this gives us time to really market and advertise and share the and we actually have a program to show people, which has received. Just the one thing I'd say before I turn it over to Kate is that one of the things we really want to push is how do we get extended day in our pre-Ks next year? The article speaks to that in the Globe, and we're hearing that from families that is a barrier, right? That the program, runs the school day, and many of our families need the aftercare that comes with it. And that's certainly a barrier for some of our most needy families, or families that are, need to work in person. So that's where it's high on our list for expansion as we think about the upcoming school year. But we're very excited about Thursday night and the expo upcoming, and I'll turn it over to Kate.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Drake, and good evening, everybody. I have a couple of colleagues here with me tonight who are going to speak to some of the slides, and I think Jensen is going to help me pull up the slides. I always mess them up, so since she's here, she's going to assist on that. I want to I think these are familiar faces, but just to point out that Sayonara Reyes, who is our manager of our Parent Information Center, is here tonight. He's going to talk a little bit about the registration process, and also Andre Fonseca, who is our director of multilingual learner programs. And we do have a lottery for our dual language classrooms. And so he is going to talk a bit about that. So Jensen, are we getting, there we go. So you can go to the first slide. I'm going to talk about and just give folks an overview to the Early Childhood Virtual Expo. We were planning this to be a live in-person recruitment event. We do this annually. It's usually been called the Kindergarten Expo, but as Dr. Zeig said, now we have an expansion of our pre-K classrooms. And so we're calling it the Early Childhood Expos, because we'll be talking about both our kindergarten and our pre-K offerings. So this was planned to be, as I said, an in-person event. We've had to pivot. We've got hundreds of people come to this event annually. Last year, we did host it virtually. It went very well. And so we're anticipating the same this year. We've been marketing this on our social media through the district's newsletter. And also we did send out notices to all of the families in Salem who will have a 4 or 5 year old by August 31st. So we sent them hard copy invitations via mail, because we were able to access that information through the census. So the event is this Thursday. It is January 20th, and will be from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And we have a simple agenda for the night. We will introduce all of our principals so that people can sort of get a name to the face. We'll have folks from our different departments, so our transportation department, food service, nursing and health services, special education, and our multilingual department. So we'll have representatives from all of those offices present as well. Dr. Drake will open the evening and say a few opening remarks, welcome the parents and family members who are in attendance. And after brief introductions of other folks who are on board, we'll give an overview to the general key features to our kindergarten and pre-K programming. So what does like a day look like in kindergarten and pre-K? We'll take a deep dive into the registration process. We find that that's really what parents want to hear. They want to know what the process is and how do they go about enrolling their child in the Salem Public Schools. So Sayonara will take on that piece. And we have put out a survey. We've been pushing that out via social media and inviting family members to ask questions. So we will sort those questions, and Dr. Zarek will serve as sort of a moderator and read the questions, and then ask the appropriate folks on our staff to answer those. And then we will open it up at the end for open questions. This is not an event where we're featuring any one school, but rather talking about our programming in general and the registration process. You can go to the next slide, Jensen, please. So we, in the past year, have been working really hard on developing print and other kinds of material, particularly video, to showcase our schools and our programs. So we have information, we have a really nice brochure that is general information about kindergarten readiness and readiness for pre-K that it serves as a nice guide for parents. Each school has a written school profile that has, picture of the school and talks about what, different features of the school are unique to that particular site. Each principal has recorded a school spotlight video. You can see Gavin Softic here, principal of the Bates, and he is and it allows parents or family members to really see the principal and hear from them and learn a little more about the school, and they can do that on their own time. They don't have to, sign on to an event to do that. We also had strung together videos, short snippets from each principal about different components of, like play and making friends in preschool and becoming independent and, those kinds of general things that are common to all of our preschool and kindergarten programs. So there's a unifying video from all of our principals. And then we have a number of frequently asked FAQ documents. So one with general questions that usually tend to focus on the registration process, but then we asked each department, transportation, food service, and so on, to also develop an FAQ. All of these materials, even the videos, have subtitles in Spanish and Portuguese. All the written materials are also have been translated into those two languages and are available now on our website. And so we wanted to make these materials available because we know some folks, would prefer to just kind of peruse these materials and learn about our schools that way, or maybe kind of poke around and then come to the Early Learning Expo, learn a little more, and then do some subsequent kind of research on their own. So I think we've really upped our game in this area. We've got lots of positive feedback on these materials last year, and they are now posted on our website. Next slide. So following the Zoom, this or the webinar, the virtual expo on Thursday, and in addition to all the printed and video materials that I just discussed, we are also going to have each school host live information sessions. And this is an opportunity for other members of the school, including the kindergarten teachers, the family engagement facilitator, teachers from the special ed department and multilingual learner teachers from the school to be present and make a live presentation and make it more informal for parents to ask questions in a smaller setting. And it's a real opportunity to kind of get to know the people, to meet the principal, although it be virtually, it's what is safe at this time. So we will have, each school will do an AM session and a PM session to make different times of the day available. And we will also record these, one of them. We've asked principals to record one, and we will have those transcribed with subtitles and post those to our website as well. So again, lots of different opportunities for family members to get to know our schools, to start beginning to think about, which school might be the best fit for their little one. We are planning to host in-person school visits the week of March 7th. That's a long way from now, and we think we should be safe with that. So I just wanted to put that out there because there's nothing like, going to the school and seeing the classroom and kind of walking the halls and whatnot. So more to come on that, but we are planning to do that. Next slide. And then here's just the landscape. We don't yet have universal preschool, but we are, angling toward that. But currently in the Salem Public Schools, we have 2 preschool classrooms at Bates, 2 at Horace Mann, and then 9 at the Early Childhood Center. And then in terms of kindergarten, we have kindergarten classrooms at each of our elementary schools except the ECC. And also we have 2 dual language kindergarten classrooms at the Bentley Academy Innovation School. And Andre will be talking a little bit more about that shortly. So now I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Sainara has the next slides, which are about registration.
Okay. One moment. Hello, everyone. I'll start with a brief, just a brief background. Students entering kindergarten are assigned according to the Salem Public Schools student assignment policy, following the timeline and criteria laid out by the policy. This policy allows parents to have options for requesting 3 different schools and the option to opt into the dual language lottery as well. The criteria used for assignments are programmatic placement, sibling preference, socioeconomic balance, and proximity to the schools. Students are assigned in a series of batches. The number of available seats within each school are proportioned as either low income or non-low income seats, depending on the enrollment targets set by the superintendent for each of the schools. Families who apply within batch 1 are processed altogether as the batch, regardless of when they apply within the batch, and the same goes for batch 2. During the pandemic, the families' level of uncertainty about sending their children to school, and just due to the pandemic, we proposed an adjustment to the batch 1 deadline and also batch 2 notification date. The adjustment allows families more time to determine their school choices for kindergarten. Parents have more time to attend Zoom school information sessions and explore all the programs available in the Salem Public Schools. So looking at the registration deadlines, the sibling preference deadline is February 22nd with a notification date of May 2nd. Batch 1, we proposed the change to be March 21st with the same notification date of May 2nd. Any applications coming in after June are assigned as they arrive. I also wanted to announce that we're very excited that we're working with Aspen. Mark LeBlanc and his team and I are working with Aspen in transitioning to an online registration system. I'm really excited about that. We hope to have it up and running in a couple of months. This year, however, kindergarten and pre-K registrations will be paper-based, unfortunately. But next year. Next slide.
Sainara, before we move on, can we go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
I just want to point out the 2 members of the committee for batch 2 for kindergarten registration. The deadline for applications is June 30th. And previously, as part of the policy, the notification date was the next day. We're not able to do that because of the dual language lottery happens during that time as well. And we need to time to do the language evaluations that are critical to placing the kids in the right buckets. So this is something that necessitates that we move that notification deadline off by 2 weeks, because if for that purpose, and Andre can speak more to that, but I did just want to highlight that. And with moving the deadline for batch 1 further off to March 21st from March 1st, it gives parents more time to get to know schools. It doesn't affect the notification date at all.
Yeah. To add on to Kate's point, that's absolutely right. So on June 30th, after both Christine and Eileen received the applications from families that are interested in the dual language program, they have to set up meetings with those families, and they have to perform language evaluations both in English and in Spanish with each child. And that takes some time, which is why they needed until July 15th to be able to have that notification date.
Okay, can we go to the next slide? So the lottery timelines for the first 2 lotteries, the dual language program and pre-K, follow the proposed batch deadlines. The registration window for batch 1 is from January 21st to March 21st. Lottery date will be April 14th and notification date May 2nd. The registration window for batch 2 is from May 3rd to June 30th, and the lottery date is July 8th, notification date July 15th. The deadline for the 3rd lottery will be August 15th. The lotteries will take place on August 18th. A verbal notification or phone call will be done to the parents August 19th, followed by regular mail. So extending, I just wanted to say that, add that extending the dates allows more time for the multilingual department to interview parents, like Andre said, evaluate students and place them in the proper linguistic group. I guess Andre will now talk more into details about the process.
So yeah, if we go to the next slide, I'll be happy to share more about our dual language program. So the first thing that I want all of our families to know is that the dual language program is an option for everyone. We have a model that's based on making sure that we have linguistic balance in our classrooms. And what that means is we take a look at our students' native languages, and we make sure there's a balance of different native languages in the classroom, because that's what actually makes our dual language program the most effective program for students. So in talking about our linguistic balance, we have 3 groups that we think of. We have that group A group that you can see there on the left, and those are students who are native English speakers. And these students are models of the Spanish language for all of their classmates, all of their peers. They tend to be multilingual learners that are either WIDA level 1 or level 2 and are still learning and developing English for the first time, but are wonderful models of Spanish for their peers. And then we have group B, and these are students that are bilingual students. They speak both English and Spanish. They might be heritage Spanish learners as well. And they're a mix of both students that are high level, multilingual learners at levels 3 and 4, and they also might not be multilingual learners at all. They might be students that were born here and are fluent in both English and in Spanish. And then we have our third group, group C, who are native English speakers. And just like our group A speakers are really valuable because they're models of Spanish language for the students in the classrooms, our native English speakers are equally valuable because they're models of native English language to their peers as well. And in addition to having that group for native English speakers, we always reserve 2 to 3 spots for any English learners that are students that don't have either English or Spanish as their first language. For example, we have a growing Brazilian Portuguese speaking population, or they might be students that speak Albanian or Arabic or other languages, and we would consider those students to be in group C. And this is about having a balance of each of these students in each classroom. So we've got 2 kindergarten classrooms with 25 students per classroom, and we want to make sure there's an even group of students from A, B, and C in both of those classrooms. So if we move on to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about the details of what this looks like. So we start with our first lottery, and we select 5 students from Group A, 6 students from Group B, and 9 students from Group C. And that might seem a little odd at first because we're noticing that there's more students from Group C being selected. But as you can see, the way it adds up, we have 17 students in total from Group C, 17 students from Group A, and 16 students from Group B. All of those students, that adds up to our 50 students. So all of those students are going to be equally distributed in the classrooms. We tend to have more of our Group C students first because we recognize that because of immigration, we have families that are coming in at different points throughout the year. And we want to give those families, especially those Group A families that are immigrating into the United States, into Salem, the same opportunity to be able to join the dual language program. So we start with smaller groups of students that we're selecting, but we do it consistently in our 3 different lotteries. So after selecting 5 students for Group A, 6 for Group B, and 9 for Group C, we run our second lottery where we again select 5 more for Group A, 5 more for Group B, and 8 for Group C. And usually at this point, we filled up all of our students that are monolingual native English speakers in Group C. If we haven't, we on our third lottery, we will definitely select more if there's still spaces needed that we need to fill for Group C, but we usually fill up by our second lottery, but we don't typically fill up all of our Group A and Group B students. After our third lottery and August 19th, we usually do have all of our Group B and Group C students filled, but we still have room for 2 more newcomers in our Group A program that happens after August 19th. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions that we might have about our dual language program and enrollment. Again, it is something that is open to all of our families, and we work really hard to make sure that in this program, students are exposed to native speakers of English as well as native speakers of Spanish, and students that are already bilingual and have both languages that they're practicing and deep they're learning in every day.
Great. So Jensen, I think you can stop the slides because we're all set there. And I think Andre is happy to take questions, or any of us. Should you?
All right, so we had a nice update on preschool, on kindergarten, or pre-K rather, kindergarten, and our dual language enrollment program. Any questions, or want to thank the team for putting that together, and certainly sharing all of your enthusiasm for both our dual language, our pre-K, and our kindergarten offerings. I had one question for Kate, but I'll let Dr. Wright sort of weigh in and offer any additional comments here.
The only thing I just want to point out is that there is an item later on in the agenda to vote for the committee to accept or to approve the shift in the timeline, because it is part of the policy and we need the school committee's approval to make the change. We did it last year as well during COVID. So I just want to note that that's coming later in the agenda.
Thank you. And that would be to move batch one's deadline to March 21st, just as for folks, just to remind folks. Question for Kate would be, are we tracking data from our pre-K students as they move into kindergarten? I'm super curious, if we can sort of track them in comparison to kindergarten. I mean, it's not exact apples to oranges because there are other programs that pre-K students may be participating in, but I think that data could be powerful as we think about making these investments long-term.
Tracking them in terms of
like readiness for kindergarten, performance, even over multiple years, who's achieving third grade reading levels, in a more consistent basis, from our own pre-K student experiences.
So we are starting, we are implementing a screening and literacy and numeracy readiness measure in our preschool classrooms. So the teachers have been trained, and I sound a little bit like a broken record with things have gotten slowed down a little bit by COVID, but they are working with Shauna Earps, who is the early learning coach across the district, to implement that and get a baseline now, a winter baseline. It's our goal is to implement that assessment. It's a quick screener 3 times a year. so that we will have that data. And then we use the star in the kindergarten through 12. So we'll have a consistent measure that will allow us to do exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's important that we track those students that we're making those pre-K investments in to, better understand how that's affecting performance, long-term in our district. As that's one of the reasons we're really investing. Ms. Campbell.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. I did have a quick question for Andre. First of all, I love the 3 windows for the dual language lottery. We have a very similar one in Lynn. It's really the best in terms of being able to capture the full student demographic. And because of the power of having those 3 opportunities spaced out throughout the summer, the spring and summer, I'm thinking about the bucket C kiddos having just the 2. And one of the things I'm thinking about is that one of the hallmarks of dual language is its impact on students regardless of home language and regardless of income level, particularly the impact for low-income students. But we also know that a lot of our low-income students are registering later in the window. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about whether that has an impact, that there may not be available seats, or like sort of how you use those 2 windows as opposed to spreading them out through all 3.
Yeah, definitely. So the idea of actually spreading out the windows, we really thought about that in terms of immigration patterns, because we knew that our families that were immigrating to the United States and coming to Salem were, for the most part, our families that were in category A. And so it was like a natural shift to choose to spread them out among the 3 windows. I could see a benefit definitely for having a smaller window for our C students. We typically have found, though, that we've gotten many of our C students, many applications for our C students within just the first 2 lotteries, a lot of interested families. And so we found that it was very possible to fill those up right away, whereas sometimes we needed to wait to make sure that we had the full group of A fully accounted for. So I guess I'd have to look a little bit more at our own trends, but I definitely could see, especially in Lynn, if it's a trend that more and more families are arriving into the district later on and they fit into category C, then it would make complete sense to actually have smaller groups for category C, because those are the trends that you're seeing in the city.
Yeah, I think it would just be interesting, in terms of, family income level, as you're looking at group C. They obviously, the vast majority of families falling into C already live within the city, but are there delays in families registering for kindergarten, and would those, and so I think it would be worth looking at for this coming registration batch to see if you're noticing a particular disparity between students who are applying earlier in batch C versus later and requesting enrollment, and if that might be worth then spacing out batch C accordingly.
Yeah.
But otherwise, obviously you should put data in mind, not just because I said so, but I think it would be worth looking at a little more closely.
Definitely. That's a wonderful suggestion, and definitely data that we want to gather as we're doing it this year.
Great. Other thoughts or questions? Ms. Carboni?
I just want to point one thing out, make sure it was understood. So on the slide where I was talking about where our kindergarten programs were, I just want especially parents or family members who may be watching to know that we did have a kindergarten class at the ECC. We are going to close that class for next year. We just don't need it in terms of enrollment. And because it was a singleton, it just made sense for us to eliminate that. So I just wanted to make sure that was understood. And we've already talked with the teacher. She is a veteran teacher and really just wonderful with the students. So certainly, we will find and work with her to find a position, in the district that, suits her skills and her interests. But I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Ms. Carboni. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Manning?
Yeah, I just was going to bring up a little segue off of the early childhood. I'm just sort of dropping the idea again of taking another look at the parent-child home program and looking at some of the funding that we have coming in to see if we can't reinstitute some of that. And I was debating whether to bring it up now or just wait for the budget discussions, but I guess I brought it up now because I'd like to see in next year's Early Childhood Expo that something like that could be a part of the expo. But then I also decided to bring it forward now, Mayor, when you were talking about the data and checking from the pre-K classes. And I know that when that program was in full swing, the data on the students' performance as they got into the upper elementary and then in through the middle school grades was consistently showing that participation in that program had a lasting effect. So I'm just dropping that into the discussion for future meetings for the coming year, the coming budget.
Thank you. Other comments or questions before we move on? All right, I want to thank the team for all the hard work, and I'm looking forward to a positive showcase with lots of people in attendance. Steve, is there anything else under Superintendent's Report?
Yeah, the only other thing is the enrollment targets. I'm sort of PowerPointed out, so I'm not.
I mean, really.
But you have a memo in your packet around, it's the superintendent's responsibility to set the enrollment targets based on demographic, or sorry, low income demographics on an annual basis. And I followed the template that Dr. Conrad had set out in the past and established targets for low income for the pick to use for our enrollment for kindergarten. I'll talk about pre-K in one moment. And you can see there was a big jump in low income percentage. A lot of that has to do with the change, another change in the way the state is calculating low income. It is now at 185% of the federal poverty level. And I did put a description of what that is now. And we were able to capture more students this year through a matching. There is a matching process that has happened historically, but we did, with the help of Mark LeBlanc's team, we did send out, and our family engagement facilitators, we did send out documents to families to see who were not designated as low income to see if they might qualify. And through that process, we were able to capture more families who are low incomes. So I think it's a combination of the change in the percentage, the opportunity we had to capture more low income families through the Student Opportunity Act. It does allow districts to document additional students. And then the third is, I think, just I think we have more low income students in the district right now. And that has shifted over time. So you can see the jump if you look at the chart on page 2 of the memo of the shift in low income across the board at every school and across the district. But again, I set the target in the same way as before. Any school that was within 5% of the district average, the targets are 50% low income, 50% not low income. Any school that was below that number, more than 5%, of low income students, then we set 60% low income and 40% non-low income. And then, and just the opposite for schools like Bentley and Witchcraft and Horace Mann that exceed the district average by 5 percentage points or more than 5 percentage points. So that's how I set the targets for the pick to use. I do also want to point out that obviously the assignment for the dual language program is different and unique based on what Andre just presented. So I'm not going to belabor that. And then of course our pre-K, if you remember, we had a conversation in the spring when we knew we were rolling out pre-K, and we discussed the targets for our pre-K program, which was 65% low income and 35% not low income. And we've decided, or I'm recommending that we keep those targets as is. The current low income enrollment across our pre-K programs is 53%, which is below the district average, which suggests that we have more work to do to recruit low income families. We do think a big part of that, as I mentioned earlier, is the access to after school care, which is something we will be working on in advance of the upcoming school year. So you have all the information in the memo. I'm again, I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions based on my recommendations for our targets for the upcoming year.
Any questions with respect to the targets? Dr. Pangala?
Yeah, about how we're setting the targets for our district with the, if you're within 5%, then it's 50-50, so forth.
Yep.
I know that over time things shift over the course of the year, and that is responsible for some of that deviation from having a more balanced across low income percentage across all the schools. But I'm just wondering if maybe we want to have what sort of discussions have occurred around having a little bit more of a larger target difference for a school like Bentley, where it's pretty far from that average value, versus a school like Horace Mann, which is outside of that range. So it's getting a different proportion of low income students, but it's closer to the average. And I'm just wondering, have we thought about applying it? Because I think this has happened a number of times over the past few years. And I'm just wondering if we maybe need a little bit of a more intense selection process, but I'm sure that there are trade-offs with that.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's something that we reflected on, and I reflected on this year. We did have a conversation about this at the executive team. I do think this is something we need to look into. I'm not sure, we have time before we set, this upcoming year. I'm curious the role that the dual language program will play around demographics, moving forward, because and I guess I don't want to make any assumptions, but I wonder what that will look like in the future based on, who's applying to the dual language program. And so I think something we should revisit, Dr. Pangalo, especially for the following school year, because Bentley is a little bit out of whack with the rest of the schools right now. Carleton is a little bit on the other end, but not quite as discrepant as Bentley. I think what's also unique is with the pandemic, every school has openings when students come in right now. The only limitation we have is transportation challenges in some buildings, but it's been unusual, right, that most schools have seats available because our class sizes are so low. And so I think we got to kind of wrap our heads around, what the reality is post-pandemic, although I thought, whenever that is. So I think we should discuss this as a committee, as a group moving forward, because I think there is cause for concern about how off the average Bentley is.
Other questions, Ms. Campbell?
I wanted to build off of what Dr. Pangelo brought up, and I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So the district has seen a shift to over 60% low income, which would make it roughly 60-40. And so from mathematically, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the table, for the schools that are within line, wouldn't they remain at 60-40 roughly to stay in line? Meaning if they're out of line, they would need even more than 60-40 to pull them into the average. Like Horace Mann, for example, is listed at 50-50 as the target. But if the goal is to keep them consistent with the city average, they would need to remain paced at 60-40. Whereas a school like Bentley, where they're a little bit shifted, like if you're only doing am I making sense? I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly.
Well, I mean, our demographic has shifted as a whole district to being proportionally a higher percentage of low income, right? So in general, every school should have a higher percentage than in the past of low income students. So I'm not sure what we did is we just kept the 5% off of the district average. It's just that the district average has shifted significantly from one year to the next.
Right. So sticking with Horace Mann, if 60-40 is where they should be to remain average with the city, like if our goal is to have a school that's proportionate with the school population, then they would be at 60-40, which means if they're within 5, they're on target. But then to say that their targets would be 50-50, but they're on target at 60-40, that skews their targets will skew their population more towards 50-50 rather than to 60-40.
Yeah, let me just look again at Horace Mann. Well, no, Horace Mann's is at 50-50.
Right, but shouldn't it be at 60-40 so it stays at 60-40? Like if you want them to be at 60-40, because roughly that's the goal, is to have it mimic the school population.
Yeah, you're giving. Let me think that through mathematically here. So yeah, I don't want to respond incorrectly. I need to process the question. So I don't, I think it's a good question. But I think so I'm just going to stop there and say, let me get back to you.
Yeah, definitely. And then if that's my question about Horace Mann, and then to build on to Dr. Pangallo's question, if Carleton is out of whack, so setting their enrollment at 60-40 or Bates at 640, that's not really swinging it, to Dr. Pangallo's point. That's kind of just steering the current kindergarten class more towards average rather than making a significant long-term shift. So as you think about, I'm not looking for an answer on that one either, but just as you consider that initial question, then with the perspective of a Bates or a Carleton, do we need a more significant shift?
Yeah, I think you raise a good question.
Ms. Cornell?
I don't think I'd thought about this before, but are we correcting the overall, in schools where there needs to be a little bit of a correction like Carleton, are we correcting the overall demographics, right? Like those overall percentages with each incoming cohort? So like, hopefully this isn't a math question because I'll fail that. But so like, if we need to correct Carleton, does that mean the incoming cohort of kindergartners has a higher percentage of low-income students, right? In order to correct the overall number.
Yes.
So I think like when Dr. Zreik, as you were saying, we need to have a conversation about this. Like, I think we need to think about like what the objective is, because is that overall school number helpful to us if each individual cohort ends up being like weirdly lopsided or something, like because we're trying to do these sort of overcorrections. I don't know if that's exactly what we're doing, but if like is that what's best for students? Is that what's best in the learning environment? So like, I don't want to like have the overall number driving the bus here when it might not be might be detrimental for a particular cohort that we're just sort of using to overcorrect, to correct the school number. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the challenge we have is that's the entry point when we have those sort of say so. Like these things happen over time. So we may have had one particular cohort leaving the community or leaving the school community, right? If you're talking about what's the burn rate look like, and then we're trying to foster balance within our school, and this is that entry point to do it. So it's definitely not a perfect science. And I think everyone's raising really good points. Like, how do we get to the ultimate goal, which is not to have schools that are lopsided in terms of their socioeconomic demographics? Yet we have these onboard entry ramps that happen at kindergarten more so than it's difficult to prevent people from, who might be leaving throughout the years and to control that. So this is the one controlling factor we have.
Right.
But it certainly has impacts, right? To your point around, course corrections that weigh in on families and impacts. But if we don't do it, that also has an impact on our overall goal. So it's very tricky.
Yeah. And that's where I just think that might be a really useful conversation about like, how do we, the goal is an admirable goal, and looking at those numbers is important, but like, maybe we need to narrow our focus a little bit, not to think about the school as a whole. Maybe that would be more helpful if what we're really looking for is the best classroom experience for each cohort of kids.
really valid point. Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Mayor Driscoll. And noting important discussion here. The piece that I wanted to touch on was, Dr. Streck, you had mentioned that the dual language program was something for us to take a look at with respect to what it would mean for future enrollment. I'm also thinking about what happens when we start expanding pre-K opportunities within the district and what that'll mean for future enrollment. And I know that one of the conversations we had when we voted on the pilot was around the 65, 35% split, recognizing you just shared data that we landed at about 53% of those kids being low income this time around. But I'm wondering, if we ever do reach, and apologies for the background noise, Ivy wants to jump in this conversation and clearly join pre-K. If we reach more students with universal pre-K down the line, when are we going to do the adjustment with respect to the balance between the number of low income versus non-low income? So are we, when do we plan to revisit? I know you're recommending right now we keep it at 65-35 for the following year, but when do we revisit that number for the pre-K seats?
Yeah, I think that's certainly can be an open conversation. I know there was discussion last year. We had 60-40, there was 65-35, there was discussion about 70-30. I mean, that might be something we want to discuss as a school. The school committee wants to discuss what we set it at. We're obviously going to work really hard. We've got more of a ramp up time to this year to recruit more families, and we think by having an extended day that will help as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm open to the committee's feedback on that as well. And I don't know if you want to have that conversation now, or we need to have that conversation.
I certainly think down the line, but clearly we're investing some of those new federal resources in this area. And I think long term, we want to figure out how we hold this in the budget. So I'm willing to, I think, have the conversation as many times as we need to get to a good place on this, because I think we should be pretty forward thinking, recognizing, we had some challenges with the pandemic in terms of getting families to sign up within the intervals with respect to the pre-K pilot program. But I think once we get closer to really prioritizing this within our budget and funding this, we want to be clear on what our value statements are. And I'm recognizing that Ms. Campbell raised this issue to us the first time around. But I think with more access, we're going to have a conversation of how do we create more equity.
Sure.
Ms. Campbell?
I'm sure everyone can guess what I'm going to say, but I'm just going to point out that with the city or with the school numbers coming in at 63.1, that puts our 65-35 not very far off from the actual city average, which is why I think we really do need to give careful consideration to increasing that, because when you talk about closing those opportunity gaps and providing access to students who need it the most, pre-K is the thing. It is the lever to pull, particularly for our low-income students. And I obviously it's not just low income. That's not the only factor, but I think we're going to have a really important conversation around, are we comfortable with it just reflecting the city, or do we want to put our money where our mouth is and say, these are the kids that we know from research, from past practice in places around the country who are doing this, that benefit the most from access to early childhood experiences, and increase that number so that it's a little bit higher than what we currently have in place and a little bit higher than the city average.
Ms. Campbell, what would be your suggestion?
Well, I don't know if you're going to want to hear it. I think 80-20, but I think 80-20.
What's that?
I think 80-20, to be honest. I'd be comfortable with 70-30, but I think if you want to really make a statement, and if we're going to expand our longer day options for families to make it more palatable, that the research really, really, really clearly indicates who benefits the most from access to it. And it's not just particularly low income, but if you say 80% of our seats will be allocated to the following types of students who we know from research benefit the most, be it from students who've had limited access to early childhood education experiences, low income, single parent homes, all of these types of things, and carefully build out a bucket of these are our students who benefit the most from it, then I'd want to see it 80-20.
Any other comments or questions on Dr. Drake's enrollment targets or any of the other items he reported out on? And I think this evening we're only voting on the deadline, so we're not necessarily voting on the splits. So at least that's my understanding. So we can certainly have further discussions and deliberations. Ms. Manning?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that Amanda has a legitimate point, and I would be certainly willing to take a look at the splits more. But I don't think, obviously not tonight, but maybe we need a cow for that or something. But it's a legitimate, I think, issue that she's raising, and I'd be willing to take another look.
Okay, we can schedule that, that committee of the meeting. Mr. Fleming?
Point of inquiry, Mayor. This is a change in policy. So I doing the three changes with one vote, or are we going to have 3 votes?
With respect to the deadline, I didn't think that was the policy. If we were talking about the percentages, that may be in the policy, Mr. Fleming. So let's first have the cow before we figure out if it's going to be a policy change. Does that make sense to you?
Makes sense to me. Just a question.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good point. Ms. Manning?
I thought that earlier somebody did say that that those deadlines and things were in the policy. I don't remember them, but I thought, did Kate say something? Dr. Carboni say something about that?
I think Dr. Drake mentioned that they were looking to move the deadline and it was changed from last year. I didn't realize it was written into a actual policy.
I don't know what
I
it is.
think they are.
I think they are. I think, yeah, you brought that up, right?
They are in a policy. That's why we're bringing that. The enrollment targets, though, are the policies. The superintendent sets the target.
Okay.
But the superintendent's not going to be foolish and set targets without getting input from the committee and the community. So that's why I brought that forward. And so yes, so we do need a vote for the change in the date of the the enrollment date, because that is in policy.
Right. The question is a policy, or is it going to require 3 readings? And so this is, from my perspective, when we think about policies, not having dates so specific are probably things we should think about, next time out. Ms. Manning?
Can we bring this up just for a vote under the, we are not making a substantive change, or would this be considered a substantive change to the policy?
I mean, I think for right now, our best bet would be to just move forward with today's vote and then determine whether we actually have to treat this as a policy change that requires 2 other votes. We need to give some direction to the staff on how to move forward. We have time to get 3 readings in, so we can just, I think if we're going to look at the policy, we should probably change it not to have specific dates and just recognize that we want them to be timely. Ms. Carboni?
So can I just say, I think the 21st, the March 21st date is just this year because of the COVID. So I don't know if that changes things, where last year you made the same decision. We delayed batch 1 last year by 2 weeks, similar. So maybe there could be an adjustment. A vote that just allows that on a temporary basis. However, the second date change that allows the language evaluations to take place for batch 2, that would need to be a permanent change, because now that we have the dual language program, we cannot turn around in one day and do the notifications, because we have to do those language evaluations. So that would take 2 weeks. So that would be the one that, if, we would need a more permanent change to the policy.
Thank you, Ms. Carboni. Ms. Manning and then Mr. Cruz.
Could I just make a motion that we vote approval of the dates that are proposed in the recommendations tonight from whoever, with the understanding that we'll review the larger issue in policy subcommittee and come forward with a recommendation, but that we make this for this year only at this time, due to the urgency to get moving it along.
Thank you, Ms. Manning. We're not taking that action yet, but I understand what you're asking. Mr. Cruz?
So the motion's on the floor. So does she need a second, or is she withdrawing the motion?
I think I took that as an inquiry about, we're trying to figure out what the right process is. I didn't realize Ms. Manning was making a motion. We have action items under new business.
No.
Right now, we're still in the superintendent's report.
Yeah, I was asking, could that be a
Okay.
motion to make?
Okay,
Bruce,
understood.
do you have something to?
I'm all set.
Okay. So, Dr. Zreik has completed his superintendent's report. We'll certainly move on to our new business. I think the compromise put out by Ms. Manning would allow staff some direction, but this policy definitely needs some attention that's larger than just this date, and certainly the dual language program dates. And if we think about how we're going to finalize it, we've got some time, certainly before March, but I think we want to give some direction to staff. So let's just move on to new business. We've got a couple of things there, and we can take this up then. It feels like we have some level of consensus about how we want to proceed with at least with respect to this issue. I believe, Manny, you mentioned that Awa is not here this evening. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add to us, add to the student representative report.
Yes, she wasn't able to make it, but she did ask that we share a couple of items. The students are in the process of planning a retreat to set some of their priorities around some campaigns that they want to plan around restorative justice, student rights, and addressing some issues around chronic absenteeism and tardiness. And so, that is where they're at. They're looking to have that retreat with a alumni of the Boston Student Advisory Council, who's running some of these trainings for youth development and leadership. So when that retreat is posted on their part, I think they'll come back and report to us kind of where they stand. And then at some point, Awa did just flag that she still would like to participate in a retreat with school committee members, maybe not the upcoming one, but down the line, just an opportunity to share out a little bit more about what they're thinking for the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cruz. Next item are action items. We've got first item is deliberation and vote to declare 8 school buses surplus property. I know Ms. Delai provided a memorandum. Perhaps if you can just give us a brief explainer on that.
Yes, absolutely. We currently have, thank you, Mayor, we currently have 15 buses in our fleet of vehicles. And obviously with 2 drivers and 1 sub driver who's actually assigned to a route this year, we are not needing 15 buses. So we have gone through the fleet and selected the ones that are in the best shape, the newest buses, lowest mileage. And we have ensured that we have redundancy. So we have 2 of each type of bus, 2 77 passenger, 2 32 passenger wheelchair accessible buses, and 2 29 passenger buses that we typically use for the smaller kids. And so that leaves 8 buses. And so I provided some information on those buses. We did ask the company from whom we purchased new buses if they would accept those vehicles as a trade-in. And in fact, they would, and they gave us trade-in values, which are in that memo. Obviously, those trade-in values are pretty low, but it's not unlike when you go to purchase your own vehicle, you're oftentimes given a very low trade-in value for your vehicle because of the task upon them to resell that vehicle. So in all likelihood, we would offer these vehicles up on Muni Bid, which is like a reverse auction. People would bid for those buses. I have seen similar buses priced anywhere from, depending on the age and the size of the vehicle, from $1,000, $2,000 up to $5,000. And so we would place those on Muni Bid, and any revenue that was received from the sale of those vehicles would obviously be a general fund revenue. It would not come to the school department unless we came obviously to the city and asked for those funds to be reappropriated. And if we did that, it would be for towards the purchase of additional vehicles. We're looking to continue to have smaller vehicles that are 7D or multifunction school activity buses that can be driven by somebody without a CDL, can be driven either by somebody with a 7D which is a much lower threshold in terms of obtaining that endorsement, or somebody who really would only need a regular driver's license. So that disposal of surplus property requires by policy that we first have the school committee declare it as such.
Okay, great. So I did notice in the memorandum that some of the buses had equal values, even though they had different distinctions. But what you're saying essentially is those were just a value set by the trade-in. They're not the value that we expect to get because we're going to be putting them out for a competitive pricing.
That's correct.
Great. Other questions or comments? And if not, I will entertain a motion to declare the 8 school buses laid out in the memo surplus property.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Cruz. Is there a second by Mr. Fleming? Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangallo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mayor Driscoll, yes. 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative. The matter carries. Next up is the item we were talking about just prior, the deliberation and vote to extend the batch 1 deadline to March 21st, 2022. This has to do with our new kindergarten enrollment. Ms. Manning would like to make a motion at this time.
Yeah, if I can remember it.
I believe
I
the
think-
motion was to approve the batch 1 deadline to March 21st and to refer the policy to the policy committee so we could have a wider discussion with respect to dates.
I think there were 2 changes, weren't there, in that chart? I forget the dates. I'm not looking at them, so I don't see them, but to
Yes.
approve the dates as suggested by central office, and to refer the larger issue of whether or not the dates belong in a policy to the policy subcommittee. But at least this would be as a first reading.
So it is the dates, the batch 1 deadline and the dual enrollment
Yes.
response date. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cruz. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangallo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
and Mayor Driscoll, yes. 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. Next item is a deliberation and vote to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to increase the rate of pay for substitutes from $120 for a regular day, I'm sorry, to $120 for a regular day and $150 for an extended day. I would entertain a motion at this time. Motion by Mr. Fleming,
Or to approve the sums, the increases in the per diem pay for substitute teachers.
okay, thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Manning.
A second. Could I ask a question?
Please, Ms. Manning, under discussion.
I don't remember if somebody could just refresh me on what the pay is now.
Dr. Strike, do you have that
Yeah,
information?
It's, I gotta just find the memo.
Or Ms. Delai? Yes. it
Oh,
is.
Yeah.
I know we've changed it.
100 for a regular school day, 130 for the extended schools.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangallo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mayor Driscoll, yes. 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I don't believe we have any budget transfers, so I'll keep us going. Subcommittee reports, can't have any, not yet. I will get your subcommittee assignments out. It is essentially inserting Ms. Cornell into the committee assignments that Ms. Nuncio had, but I will get those out this evening. I will try to. Any school committee concerns and resolutions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Fleming,
Move to adjourn.
seconded by Ms. Manning. All those in favor, Ms. Manning?
Yep.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangallo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
And Mayor Driscoll, yes, the matter carries. Ms. Cornell, congratulations on your first meeting, and we're out by 9 p.m. That's a good start.
Welcome.
I'm going to
okay,
bed.
everyone. Yeah. All right. Have a good night, folks. Thank you for all the hard work. Much appreciated.
We're done.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Ivy. Night, Ivy.
Kristen, say good night. You say bye? Yeah, that's good. That's good applause. Bye.